Before you judge me for what I did, understand this: some people don't just ruin moments, they ruin entire lives. And when someone spends years taking pieces of you, one by one, eventually you stop trying to protect yourself and you start planning how to end them. My brother wasn't always a monster, but he became one long before I realized it. This story isn't about jealousy, it's about survival. The day he destroyed my wedding wasn't the day I broke. No, it was the day I finally opened my eyes. If you've ever trusted the wrong person or watched someone smile while crushing you from the inside, this story is for you. So stay with me till the end, because my revenge wasn't loud, but it was final. I grew up in a house ruled by invisible hierarchies, where love wasn't distributed fairly but awarded like a prize to the fragile and the favored. Todd was that prize. From the moment he was born, weak and clinging to life in the ICU, my parents' attention became absolute and obsessive. I should have been happy that my brother survived. I should have loved him unconditionally. But their obsession wasn't gentle. It wasn't protective. It was suffocating. Every toy, every bedtime story, every ounce of praise was filtered through Todd. Abby and I were background noise tolerated only when we didn't interfere. I remember sitting in our small bedroom staring at him as he lay in the crib, pale and fragile, and hearing my parents whispering about how miraculous he was, how we should be grateful he made it, while I felt a hollow knot forming in my chest. A thin, cold, metallic thing, the early blueprint of something that would grow into pure, calculated rage. Birthdays were the first battlegrounds. I remember my 8th birthday perfectly. Balloons, a cake with my name and frosting, friends laughing in the living room, everything set up to celebrate. But then Todd screamed. Not a cry of hurt or fear, but a shrill, demanding, "Look at me." My parents froze, panicked, and the party dissolved around him. All the energy of celebration was absorbed by Todd's tantrum. Photos from that day confirm what I already felt. He was at the center of every frame while Abby and I faded into corners, faces blank, unnoticed, irrelevant. It wasn't just about stolen attention. It was about being trained to accept that your achievements, your milestones, your happiness were secondary. Todd thrived on it. He learned that chaos was a tool, that a well-timed cry or outburst could bend the world around him. And bend it he did, with precision. As we grew older, his games grew with him. When I got a good grade, he'd find a way to top it. When I liked someone at school, somehow he'd charm them first. When I achieved anything, no matter how small, he had to be the one, clapping the loudest in public while mocking me the moment we were alone. I learned to shrink myself, to stay quiet, to avoid drawing attention, because whenever attention came my way, Todd needed to steal it, and he always did. Steal it, and he always did. In high school, things escalated. Not physically, emotionally. The day I made the basketball team, he told everyone I only made it because the coach felt bad for me. The night I won a small writing contest, he accidentally spilled juice on the certificate. Every time I fought back, he made sure I looked crazy because that was his power. He lived in the gray area between truth and lies. He never swung a fist, never screamed. He manipulated. That's harder to prove, harder to explain, harder to fight. So I stopped fighting. I started surviving. When Michelle entered my life, everything shifted. Not because she fixed me, she didn't, but she saw me. Really saw me. She noticed the quiet pauses in my conversations, the half-swallowed sentences, the way I apologized before speaking. She didn't push, she understood. The first time she met Todd, her expression changed in a way she thought I didn't notice. He shook her hand too long, complimented her too boldly, laughed too loudly at jokes he didn't need to laugh at. Later she asked quietly, "Does he always act like that?" I didn't have an answer because explaining Todd was like explaining smoke. You can describe it, but the moment you try to grab it, it slips between your fingers and makes you look foolish. But she didn't run. She stayed close, held my hand a little tighter, and for the first time in years I felt grounded. Todd wasn't stupid. He sensed it instantly, the shift in me, the presence of someone he couldn't control, someone who didn't fall for his charm. So he smiled wider, acted kinder, pretended to be supportive, but behind that smile, something twisted grew. He began inserting himself into every moment. If I told Michelle a story, he'd correct me with a version that made him look heroic. If we made dinner plans, Todd would coincidentally show up at the restaurant. If Michelle posted a picture of us, Todd was the first to comment something borderline inappropriate masked as humor. Michelle didn't like him. He could see that, and he hated it. Todd didn't just need attention, he needed domination. He needed to be the center, the sun, the orbit everything revolved around. But Michelle didn't orbit him. She didn't care about him. So he decided to make her care by destroying something she loved. The night I proposed to Michelle was supposed to be pure, perfect ours. But Todd ruined even that. I'd invited him and a few family members to dinner afterward. Nothing big, just a small celebration. As soon as we told them the news, Todd clapped loudly, hugged us both, and said, "I knew you'd say yes. I mean, obviously." Then he lifted his glass and toasted not to us, to himself. To me for being the one who introduced you. Too. He hadn't. He had nothing to do with it. But he took the moment anyway. While everybody laughed, Michelle looked at me with quiet, understanding sadness. She could feel how small I felt in that moment. Most people forget their brother's words by the end of the night. Not me. Those words were the crack in the wall, and Todd was about to smash through it. As the wedding approached, Todd's behavior sharpened. He insisted on giving a speech because I'm the brother. I should have one. He insisted on being involved in planning. The family should be included. He insisted on choosing his own entrance song, something loud, obnoxious, attention-grabbing. Michelle tried to keep peace, but even she felt the tension. The week before the wedding, Todd visited my apartment and walked straight into the living room like he owned the place. He sat down, leaned back, and said with a smirk, "Can't believe you're getting married before me." Never thought that would happen. I kept quiet. I was used to his jabs. But then he added something darker. Something that set my teeth on edge. "You know, weddings are funny. You never know what could go wrong. People forget lines. Rings go missing. Some folks accidentally say the wrong thing in front of the wrong people." He looked at me like a man testing the sharpness of a knife. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Michelle found me later that night, sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. She placed her hand on my back and asked quietly, "Was it your brother?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She knew. Most grooms can't sleep the night before their wedding because they're nervous. I couldn't sleep because I was terrified. Not of marrying Michelle. Of Todd. What would he say? What would he do? What moment would he steal? I stared at my suit hanging on the door, the ring on the table, the vows I spent months writing. And all I could think was, please, just this once. Don't ruin it. But Todd wasn't the kind of person who let anything, especially happiness, exist without his fingerprints all over it. That's when I realized the storm was coming, and for the first time in my life, I was ready to stop running and start striking. The wedding wouldn't just be a celebration. It would be the stage for decades of silent suffering to finally erupt into justice. I had planned it all, waited for the perfect moment, and now Todd was about to learn what happens when you push someone too far for too long. The morning of my wedding didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like standing on the edge of a battlefield, armor on, heart pounding, pretending everything was normal while silently waiting for the first strike. I woke up before sunrise, not from excitement, but from a strange heaviness sitting on my chest. Every instinct inside me whispered the same warning. Todd is going to ruin this. Michelle was asleep beside me, peaceful in a way I rarely saw her. She deserved joy, deserved a day free from tension, free from the games my family played. Especially Todd. I watched her for a moment, memorizing the calm on her face, reminding myself why I couldn't let anything, not even decades of trauma, touch this day. So I forced myself out of bed, straightened my spine, and told myself that I would protect this wedding with every ounce of strength I had. Jim arrived early to help me get ready. He wasn't just my best friend, he was the one person who had seen Todd's behavior up close, seen the subtle cruelty, the manipulative smiles, the way Todd could twist any situation into a spectacle that conveniently centered around him. Jim handed me a cup of coffee and looked at me with that knowing expression. "You slept like crap, didn't you?" I didn't even bother denying it. "He's going to do something," I muttered under my breath. I can feel it. Jim didn't laugh. He didn't shrug it off. He nodded slowly and lowered his voice. "That's why we're ready. Whatever he tries, we'll shut it down." The way he said "we" calmed something inside me. I wasn't alone this time. I had allies. For once, Todd wasn't going to steamroll through my life unchallenged. But even with Jim's reassurance, I couldn't shake the tension sitting in my stomach. At the venue, while the decorators rushed around adding final touches, I scanned every corner as if Todd could pop out from behind a flower arrangement holding a giant neon sign that said, "Look at me." When the photographer asked me to smile, I tried, but my jaw felt locked. The weight of the past pressed against the back of my skull until even breathing felt mechanical. Jim stood beside me, adjusting his tie, and then his eyes narrowed at something across the room. "He's here." The words hit me like a drop in temperature. Todd had arrived too early, and that alone was suspicious. He didn't like being on time unless there was an audience. But there he was, dressed in a suit that was somehow flashier than appropriate, styled hair, confidence dripping off him like perfume. And of course Lucy was with him, glowing, pregnant, smiling politely in a way that almost made me feel sorry for her. She had no idea what kind of man she was in love with. Or maybe she refused to see it. Either way, today she would learn the truth. Todd strutted into the venue like he owned it, greeting guests, hugging relatives, cracking jokes loudly, positioning himself in the center of every group. The way he moved was deliberate. He wanted attention. He expected it. And something in the way he held Lucy's hand, something in the overly orchestrated sweetness of his gestures, screamed one thing to me: he was performing. When he finally approached me, he spread his arms dramatically. "Look at you, big brother." Finally tying the knot. His voice carried across the room, loud enough to turn heads. I forced a smile because I refused to let him see how tense I was. He leaned closer, lowering his voice just slightly. "Try not to be so serious. It's a happy day." And then, without breaking eye contact, he slipped something into his jacket pocket, a small velvet box. He thought he was slick. He wasn't. My heart rate spiked, but my face stayed neutral. He was going to propose. At my wedding. After promising he wouldn't. After the fight with our parents. After everything. That moment was when I felt something in me shift. Not anger, not panic, but an icy clarity settling into my bones like frost spreading across glass. Jim, who was watching from a distance, caught the movement too. He mouthed, "It's happening." The ceremony began beautifully. Michelle was breathtaking soft, elegant, radiant in a way that made everything else in the room fade. When she walked down the aisle, I forgot the noise in my head. I forgot Todd. I forgot everything except her. For a moment, I felt peace. But peace in my world never lasted long. Todd stayed quiet during the ceremony, which should have been reassuring. But for me, it was a warning. When a man like him was silent, he wasn't respecting boundaries. He was waiting for the perfect moment to destroy them. And that moment came during the reception. Michelle's father-daughter dance was emotional in the purest, most vulnerable way. Her father held her gently, whispering things I couldn't hear but could feel through her expressions: old memories, childhood moments, fatherly pride. The guests watched with warm eyes. This was the heart of the wedding. The moment meant to freeze in time. The kind of moment a decent human being would never interrupt. But Todd wasn't decent. As the music played and people turned toward the dance floor, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Todd stood up, slowly, casually, like a man stretching his legs. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out the velvet box, and began walking toward Lucy. The crowd didn't notice at first, but I did. My stomach dropped. My palms went cold. Through the soft golden lighting and the slow melody of the dance, I watched him kneel beside Lucy. His voice rose just enough to be heard over the music. "Lucy, baby." Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Cameras lifted. The spotlight, like a predator sensing its prey, shifted onto him. My chest tightened as rage flooded my veins so fast it almost made me dizzy. Michelle's father noticed the murmuring. He looked around, confused, unsure why all attention was suddenly leaving the dance floor. Michelle followed his gaze and saw Todd kneeling. I watched her face collapse from pure joy to pure hurt in a matter of seconds. Her eyes dimmed. Her lips parted like she'd been physically struck. I will never forget that expression, ever. Lucy gasped dramatically, placing a hand over her mouth. Todd opened the ring box with a theatrical flourish, deliberately angling his body so every camera, every pair of eyes had a clear view. He didn't care about Lucy. He cared about spectacle. He cared about stealing the moment. He cared about winning. The room erupted in whispers, gasps, applause from people too clueless to realize the cruelty unfolding in front of them. I felt something inside me finally break, not snap with anger, but fracture, like glass under slow pressure. Decades of humiliation, sabotage, manipulation, and silent suffering folded into that one scene. He had done it. He had taken the most important moment of my life and dragged it into his orbit as if I didn't exist. Michelle stepped away from her father slowly. Her eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink away. She didn't want to ruin my day with her pain. But Todd already had. Jim grabbed my shoulder tightly. "It's time," he whispered. He wasn't asking permission. He wasn't giving advice. He was confirming what we both knew. The line had been crossed, and there was no going back. Todd pulled Lucy into a dramatic kiss as people clapped. He stood up triumphantly, lifting her hand like he'd won a championship. He expected applause. He expected praise. He expected the spotlight. He didn't expect what was coming next. I watched him grin, chest puffed out, basking in his stolen glory. And as he turned toward me, expecting me to congratulate him, our eyes met. His smile faltered just slightly, because he saw something in my face he'd never seen before. Not fear, not resignation, not the usual quiet pain. He saw calm. Sharp, cold, dangerous calm. The kind of calm a man has when he's already planned what comes next. The kind of calm right before the storm hits. And that's when I leaned forward just enough for him to see my lips form the words, "Game over." The moment Todd stepped back from the failed performance of his perfect proposal, I felt the familiar cold edge of control settle into my bones. Decades of carefully bottled anger, of silent suffering, of every humiliation, every stolen celebration, all of it funneled into one singular opportunity. I had waited years for this. Now the stage was set. I could strike without hesitation, and I did. I motioned subtly to Jim. He understood instantly. No words were necessary. The plan we had rehearsed quietly, meticulously, for weeks would unfold in seconds. A woman, hired days ago, walked calmly toward Todd and Lucy. She had rehearsed every line, every hesitation, every moment of trembling fear, all to look like a person whose life had been ruined by Todd. Her gaze met his, and the calmest, most terrifying accusation left her lips. "Todd, we need to talk about the baby." The room froze. Guests turned. Whispers began. Some faces went pale. Some mouths hung open. I could feel the atmosphere shift like a storm rolling in. Todd's eyes went wide. For the first time that day, the confident mask cracked. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His heartbeat must have thundered in his ears because I could see it, every pulse betraying him. Lucy's face crumpled. Her fingers pressed to her lips, her voice small and trembling. "Todd, what is this?" Todd fumbled. I don't. She's lying." "It's not." His protest sounded weak, hollow, pathetic. He was trying to salvage a performance that had already collapsed. I watched him panic like a predator caught in a trap he designed himself. Guests craned their necks, whispers turned to murmurs of confusion, judgment. Todd's world began unraveling in slow motion. I watched every micro-expression, the twitch of his lips, the falter in his hands, the sudden stiffness in his posture. She pulled out a phone and called him directly. The ringtone cut through the stunned silence. Todd's own phone rang in his pocket. Panic exploded across his face. His carefully rehearsed demeanor vanished entirely. He stepped back, turning toward me, hoping for rescue, for some invisible ally to save him. There was none. Only the cold, unwavering gaze of someone who had spent years planning this exact moment. Lucy, overwhelmed, took a step back and threw the ring at the floor. Her voice trembled. I can't do this. She spun on her heel, tears streaking her cheeks, and fled toward the exit. The room was silent except for gasps, whispers, and the soft echo of the ring hitting the floor. Todd looked down at it, then up at me. The realization hit him instantly. I had orchestrated every detail. Every timing, every accusation, every subtle trap. He had no defense, no escape. His pride, carefully built over 30 years, crumbled in seconds. I felt the tension in my chest ease slightly, replaced by a surreal, icy satisfaction. I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. I didn't have to. The chaos spoke for itself. Every guest could see the pattern. Todd had tried to dominate, to steal, to perform. And for the first time in his life, he had failed. And the cost was spectacular. The next few minutes were a blur of murmurs and confusion. My parents approached, panic etched into their faces. What happened? My mother stammered. I looked at her calmly. Ask him, I said. And she did, but Todd didn't know what to say. His protests sounded weak. Every attempt to explain himself faltered under the weight of his own deception. Jim stayed at my side, silent, a sentinel. Todd's eyes darted to him, then back to me. Every failed look, every fractured smile, confirmed what he already knew. I had outmaneuvered him completely. After the wedding, when the guests had left, when the candles were dimmed and the music faded, the fallout continued. Todd tried calling Lucy, but she refused to answer. She blocked his number, changed routines, and in one swift motion erased him from the life he thought he controlled. Our parents begged me to intervene, to clear his name, to step in as if I were somehow responsible for undoing his mistakes. I sent one text, a vague message stating I had no idea what he was talking about, and attached a screenshot of the wedding bill, a subtle reminder that he had caused financial and emotional chaos, and demanded reimbursement for half the costs. I didn't respond further. I had nothing to say. My revenge wasn't about words. My revenge wasn't about words. It was about results. Todd's arrogance and entitlement had been perfectly neutralized. Lucy's decision to reject him, to protect herself and her child, validated years of planning. For the first time, he experienced powerlessness, the hollow emptiness of being exposed, humiliated, and alone. I watched, distant but satisfied, as he realized that no amount of charm, pleading, or excuses could undo the damage. The very foundations he had built his identity upon, manipulation, performance, entitlement, were demolished. Abby confronted me later, her voice trembling. Did you go too far? I met her eyes, calmly, steadily. No, I said. I finally protected someone I love myself and made sure that Todd couldn't destroy that moment. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. I knew it was hard for her to watch, but she also understood that for decades Todd had been allowed to dominate. Today, someone finally stopped him. As for me, Michelle knew every step I had taken. She had given me the silent green light the moment Todd ruined her father-daughter dance. I felt no guilt, only a strange, peaceful satisfaction, the kind that comes from seeing justice done in the most precise, surgical way imaginable. Todd was furious. He raged, he demanded explanations, he called, he texted, but I stayed silent. I let him sit in the wreckage of his own making. For the first time in decades, he had no control over me, over the moment, over anyone. Weeks later, he tried to reconcile. Lucy had thrown him out, restricted access to their child, and blocked all communication. His pride was shattered, his reputation questioned, his manipulations exposed. He had been forced to face consequences he had never imagined, all orchestrated by someone he had underestimated for decades, me. And I realized something critical that day. Revenge isn't about cruelty. It's about balance. It's about righting the scales that have been tilted for too long. It's about showing someone that their actions have consequences, even if it takes a lifetime to teach them. Todd's betrayal, his constant theft of joy and dignity, had finally met its equal. I didn't smile outwardly. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even speak. I simply walked away with Michelle, hand in hand, knowing that the storm had passed and the world finally made a little more sense. If you ever feel powerless, remember this. Sometimes patience, observation, and planning are the most potent weapons. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits. And when it strikes, it leaves nothing standing in its path. If this story gave you chills, hit like. Comment your own story of standing up to someone who wronged you. And subscribe for more tales where karma is earned, meticulously and memorably.